Hey, folks, welcome back to another episode of Exchange Traded Fridays. I'm Jeff Benjamin, Wealth Management Editor here at ETF.com. Joined this week by Samit Roy, Senior ETF Analyst, Managing Editor Ron Day, and Contributing Editor James Rubin. You're listening to this on Black Friday, the day after Thanksgiving, and we've got at least one theme that fits the Thanksgiving week. We're looking at the turkeys of 2024, the worst performing ETFs this year through November 20th in 7 categories. We'll talk a little bit about that. Some of those, you can find those at ETF.com if you want to see the full list. We're also going to be talking about Bitcoin. Bitcoin a week or so ago was testing $100,000. Now it's dropped back a little bit, but everybody seems to think it's going to get there, maybe even by the end of the year. We've still got a month left. And finally, our final segment is going to be Gary Gensler, who everybody has a perspective, I guess, on the SEC chairman, but he decided to throw the final dart in his petty little political statement by resigning on the day of Donald Trump's inauguration. So we'll see where that goes. That's probably an ongoing story here, but first of all, let's talk about the turkeys of 2024. It was a fun little list that we put together. We picked the categories. We used our own ETF Pulse tool on ETF.com. A couple of examples in the currency ETFs year to date. The worst performer in that category was the Invesco Currency Shares Japanese Yen Trust, ticker FXY, down 9.4%, which is not horrible. On the other end of the spectrum, we've got the in leveraged and inverse ETFs. Now, granted, this is a short selling trading vehicle. Direction Daily FTSE China Bear 3 times shares ETF, ticker YANG, down 98.5%. Now, keep in mind this is something betting against the essentially a proxy for the Hang Seng index of made up of 82 companies that trade on the Chinese exchange. Samit, let's start with you on this. You saw the list, you've looked it over. What are some of what stands out to you? I mean, granted, we're cherry picking. Let's admit it. We've got 7 categories. We're looking at the worst performers, just probably so we can use the word turkey during Thanksgiving week. But anything stand out to you here?
Yeah, I mean, I love this list we put together, Jeff, because usually we have these lists, worst performing ETFs of the year, and you tend to get one category of ETF all dominating the list. But in this case, you chose the worst ETF in each category. So it gives us a wider range of ETFs. And a lot of things stand out to me here. A lot of these ETFs that we see here were very big in the news throughout the year. The Invesco Currency Shares Japanese Yen Trust is on here, FXY. You mentioned it's down 9%, which isn't that much compared to some of the other ETFs on this list. But for a currency ETF, that's actually a big number. And a lot of people listening might recall earlier this year, there was a lot of drama about the Japanese yen tumbling and how the
Mm-hmm.
yen carry trade was unwinding, and that actually caused a big 8 or 9% sell-off in the S&P 500. So this was a very, impactful thing, the Japanese yen going down. And the reason for that was because the Japanese interest rates are so much lower than they are elsewhere in the world, especially compared to the US, where rates are still around 5%. And when the yen was tumbling earlier this year, it seemed like the Fed was going to keep rates high, maybe even potentially hike rates further because we were seeing these strong inflation numbers early in the year. Of
Mm-hmm.
course, that changed. The Fed eventually started to cut rates, but again, it's looking like the Fed isn't going to cut nearly as much as markets had envisioned. And we might even get the last rate cut in a while in December. So rates in the US are going to stay high. Rates in Japan are probably going to stay pretty low. And that keeps pressure on the Japanese yen. And I'm looking at the chart of the Japanese yen, and yeah, it's still near multi-year, multi-decade lows. So it's going to be
Mm-hmm.
interesting to see whether this poor performance in the yen continues next year. Another ETF that stands out to me is GOVZ, which is the iShares 25 plus year Treasury Strips Bond ETF. We talk a lot about TLT on this podcast, but this is just another long duration bond ETF, but it has an even longer duration than TLT because these strips, they don't pay periodic interest. So you get
Hmm.
paid back all at once the bonds mature, and that makes them very, very interest rate sensitive. So you look at GOVZ, it's down I don't know, 7, 8%. You compare that to TLT, down 3%. So
Uh-huh.
when interest rates are going up and bond prices are going down, that's going to hurt you. But if you're someone who's bullish on bonds, you think bonds are eventually going to recover, then something like GOVZ actually might be right up your alley. Might even be better than TLT if you want maximum interest rate sensitivity.
Okay.
Uh, and then you mentioned Yang. Jeff, any thoughts on that? Because I know we talked about China ETFs a lot earlier this year. This is the inverse of that.
I, my only thoughts on that are the thoughts I always have on these inverse or leverage strategies that they're trading vehicles. If you sit in them, you got a chance of riding something if the trend is going in your direction. But obviously, this is something that is not going in your direction. It's three times betting against the Hang Seng or a proxy for the Hang Seng. It, you know, $136 million went into the ETF this year. The total assets are 146 million. It's a very expensive strategy, 1.09%. Like I said, these things are trading vehicles. Most financial advisors are probably not messing around with this stuff. There's all kinds of other ways to get exposure to China or foreign markets. This is just there because it's super fun to look at something that's down 98.5%.
Hey, Jeff, one thing I'm noticing is that all of these, even though these are the turkeys, they all have inflows except for that asset allocation, the TAIL, Cambria Tail Risk, which I guess bets against the S&P 500. So, I mean, I'm just thinking about all the money going into these things and all these. There are a lot of financial advisors and investors who are crying
Mm-hmm.
about these lousy returns, which it's part of the risk of investing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's just so I don't know if there are financial advisors who are losing their jobs over some of these things, but it's just interesting to see the money is still going into them.
Yeah, well,
So
that's what makes a market, obviously. And as I said, some of these things are trading vehicles. You got the ProShares VIX short-term futures ETF, VIXY, $403 million in net flows, down 28.5%. That's again, it's a trading vehicle. People are betting on the volatility of the markets.
it
But
also suggests that volatility. I don't know what volatility has. I thought it was a volatile year. Does this if you're betting if you're long volatility? I mean, is this suggesting that we did not have a very volatile year in trading?
uh well, the volatility index, the CBOE volatility index is up nearly 35% this year. So, like I said, these are things that bet one way or another. Some of these trading vehicles, I mean, granted, all the turkeys on this list are not that way. I mean, let me
Yeah.
let me shift over to the Yield Max mRNA Option Income Strategy ETF, ticker mRNA. This is a strategy. It's a single stock exposure, essentially. I don't think it's defined as a single security ETF, but it really is. It was launched in October 2023. It's an actively managed fund that uses a covered call strategy to provide income while tracking the performance of Moderna, the one of the companies that came out with a COVID vaccine. Well, the kind of the bloom is off the rose for companies making COVID vaccines right now. This ETF is down 63% this year. Coincidentally, it had 63 million in inflows. So there you go. You get $1 million for every percent down, I guess.
And
Um,
Ron, you're talking about the VIX ETF. Those things they tend to go down over time, especially when the market's going up, right? When the market's rallying, people tend to, be pretty complacent, and the VIX tends to stay at relatively low levels. But it's not only that. When you're buying a VIX ETF, you're buying an ETF that holds VIX futures contracts. And typically, the VIX futures curve is in what's called contango. So it's upward sloping. And over time, these ETFs have to sell the VIX at a lower price and then buy it at a higher price. And that results in losses over time. So these definitely aren't buy and hold type of ETFs, because they do tend to decay over time because of the structure of the futures market. And it's similar to some of the commodities ETFs we see that hold commodities futures. UNG is another one on this list, the natural gas ETF. It's down something like 30% year to date, but you look at natural gas itself and the price is up 30% year to date. So huge divergence there. And that's because of the contango in the futures market.
All right. Let's shift over to our second segment, Bitcoin. The price as we record this on Wednesday before Thanksgiving is almost $95,000. Last week it was testing $100,000, never got there, but it was at 99 and a whisker a few times.
Yeah.
I had a conversation with Rick Edelman, the crypto guru, I like to call him or think of him. He had a lot of things to say. He's incredibly bullish on crypto, obviously, or if you know him, it's obvious. And he says it's going to get to 100,000 this year. By the end of next year, it'll be 140,000. By the end of the decade, 420,000. One of his mantras is if you I don't know how much crypto you own, but it's not enough. So I want to go to James for this. James is our kind of our crypto expert, insider, what have you. What are your thoughts on this, James? Are we testing 100,000, and if we get there, what happens? Is there going to be a little bit of profit-taking pullback?
Yeah, that's kind of what we're already seeing, and there's a little bit of kind of risk off, a shift to risk off mode, and some of the analysts that I track, whose judgment I respect, we're predicting that we'd see this little pullback, and it's not unusual historically, in the sense that we have these surges and then these pullbacks or mini pullbacks. I would refer you all to some of the predictions that were made earlier this year that we would see Bitcoin. I think among them was Standard Chartered, the UK digital bank, that was predicting that Bitcoin would finish the year. I want to say, don't necessarily quote me on this, but it was certainly well over 100,000. I think it was around 120,000. And you have a number of other people who were predicting that Bitcoin would wind up over 100,000. So I think that story, in short, has not been told as of yet. We could see another spike. Interesting in just today that Ethereum is up. That's the second largest crypto by market cap, and is up over the last week. Solana, on the other hand, which is a competitor to Ethereum, considered a faster, more efficient protocol than Ethereum, than the Ethereum blockchain, is down today, and is down somewhat over the last week, and that has been in the news, obviously, because we've had this proliferation of spot Solana ETFs, and the thinking is that those are going to be approved under a more crypto friendly SEC, and that, I think, the SEC's change is a looming backdrop for what's going to be happening on crypto. A lot of people feeling a lot more optimistic because the Trump administration is expected to be considerably more crypto friendly than the Biden administration. Would note just two little bits of information on that. Namely, two of the leading candidates, or two candidates that have been mentioned as potential replacements for Gary Gensler, who, as you noted at the top of our conversation, is going to be resigning on Inauguration Day. Pierce, who is a SEC commissioner, who is called Crypto Mom, nicknamed affectionately by the industry, and Christoph Giancarlo, former CFTC chair, who is nicknamed Crypto Dad. They are among the candidates. The leading candidate, by the way, is Brian Brooks at this point, from what I can tell, who's the former U.S. controller of the currency. And
We
also,
also, James, if I could just jump in, we also have this blockchain lawyer, Teresa Goody Guillen, who we wrote about the other day, also being looked at as a top replacement, a top nominee to replace Gensler.
Yeah, and all of them are on record as, and more than that, they've certainly been very pro crypto. So you factor that in as much as anything, and the crypto industry and investors, more importantly, more widely, are feeling very good about where crypto is going. And again, I would say, where Bitcoin ends this year, what did it start the year? About $45,000. Where it ends, how far above $100,000, I think that remains to be seen, and I don't think would surprise many people if it winds up considerably above that magical threshold.
Guys, you know what's interesting to me? We had spot Bitcoin ETFs launched in the US back in January, right? And everyone at the time was wondering, are ETF investors late to the party? Because it took something like 10 years before investors were finally able to buy spot Bitcoin ETFs in the US. And in that time, Bitcoin had, of course, run up, hundreds of percent. And ETF investors seemingly missed all of that run. But you look from, the date that ETFs launched in the US, Bitcoin ETFs, the price has more than doubled in Bitcoin. January 11th, I think, was the day we got Bitcoin ETFs, and Bitcoin was trading around $46,000, and a few days ago it hit $99,000. So I guess the rally continues, and ETF investors weren't necessarily late to the party. I guess they were late to the party, but the party continues to go on, and who knows how long it's going to continue to go on. I just find that fascinating. Right after the ETF launch, we get a doubling of the price.
That's this party is more like a rave than sort of a one day sort of thing. Yeah. I mean, look at since January 11th, when they started trading, look where they are. I mean, what is it, 60 billion plus now in inflows to the Bitcoin ETFs. We have in fairly quick, very quick succession. We have I believe it's 9 spot Ethereum ETFs. Solana is up, XRP is up. I think you wrote about XRP this week, and some proposals that are now that the SEC will wait for XRP, another so-called altcoin.
Almost 8 billion into IBIT this past month.
Yeah, I mean, these are crazy.
2 billion in 5 days. It's nuts.
Yeah, these are crazy numbers, right? I mean, against any and all other types of ETFs, where have you seen inflows to that degree? You'd be a better sort of historical, a better archivist of this, Sumit and Jeff, than I. But I mean, these numbers are through the roof.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, record-breaking numbers, and I mean, even in the context of Bitcoin, these are huge numbers. The IBIT, 32 billion. Bitcoin ETFs in general, 30 billion. And Bitcoin, if you look at the market cap today, $1.8 trillion. So, these are still significant, even compared to the Bitcoin market cap, right? Something like, 2% of Bitcoin's market cap in just, several months.
What is, Sumi, what is gold's market cap right now?
Gold, I mean, I don't have the figures off the top of my head, but I think it's over 10 trillion or something. If you add up all the gold, that's ever been mined, multiply it by the price. But, some people argue, that's what we should be comparing Bitcoin to. Yeah. Others argue gold has jewelry demand and demand for technology and electronics and things like that. So it's not necessarily comparable exactly. But yeah, I mean, maybe that's the next target, 10 trillion.
Yeah, I mean, and that's what a lot of people are sort of holding up as sort of the threshold for, or a threshold for Bitcoin at this point, that it has all this way to go because they're both considered hedges, currency hedges. So,
Yeah.
When you look at that, there's still huge amounts to grow potentially.
Yeah, one final point on Bitcoin for context before we move on is we're talking about $100,000 here, and at $100,000 level, that's what this conversation is essentially about. In 2018, Bitcoin was at 3,000. In 2022, it was at 15,000. So,
Yeah.
if you want to talk about being late to the party, I mean, like you guys said, this might be one of those all-nighters.
Yeah,
So,
it started 2017 at a little over 1,000, as I
yeah.
recall. So yeah.
All right, so let's Gary Gensler. James kind of drifted into the Gary Gensler topic a little bit, and we're gonna maybe finish that conversation. Gary Gensler, he has announced he's resigning on January 20th, the day of President Trump's inauguration. To me, that looks like about as petty and political as it can get in an agency that is supposed to be apolitical. But obviously, it's not apolitical because we all can count the R's and the D's next to everyone's name on the commission, I should say. I frankly think it's kind of ridiculous that his resignation, he's got until 2026 is his term. He will likely get demoted from chair to a member of the commission. But from my perspective, if Gensler really felt like he was doing things that are supposedly helpful for the investors that he's supposed to represent, why wouldn't he just stay on the commission and kind of continue to fight the good fight? I think Hester Peirce, she is one of the likely candidates to take over as SEC chair. It could be a more crypto-friendly commission if she was in charge, but I'm told she doesn't want to be in charge. She does not want that position. It's likely we'll see somebody coming in from the outside, which is kind of unfortunate because it's going to be somebody that's more conservative, a Republican, what have you. This just kind of takes something into more of an imbalance. But that's kind of my take. I know, Ron, you wrote something about Gensler's departure and likely candidates. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's funny because when you mention that, the first thing that comes to mind is my interview with Rick Edelman the other day. He is no fan of, I mean, he's a huge, crypto cheerleader, no fan of Gary Gensler. Now, I guess if you're not a big crypto advocate, or if you're just kind of dabbling in it, you think Gensler was maybe doing the right thing by being cautious and highlighting the fraud potential of crypto and the big crashes with FTX and blah blah blah. But Edelman says Gensler was just obstinate. He was not cautious. He was standing in the way of progress. He was yeah, I mean, he laced into him. So, I mean, there's this real kind of turning of the attitudes at the top of the SEC, from kind of caution to, I don't know. I'm not there. I don't know, but as kind of a casual observer, I can appreciate both sides.
Mhm.
So I'm just not an expert. I'm just someone who listens and
Well,
then
and this is
writes
something.
what people says.
I mean, people are, talked about him as he kept his foot on the brake regarding crypto. Remember, under his leadership, we got this year we got Bitcoin ETFs and spot Ethereum ETFs. Now, some
Yeah.
people will say the spot Ethereum move was he was under pressure from the Biden administration because Trump was gaining in the polls and he was riding the the Bitcoin wave, and the Democrats seemed a little behind the curve on that. Who knows what the inside story is on that? But those were things that came under Gensler's leadership. So
Yeah.
my
Yeah.
thinking still is when I see these things that are supposed to be apolitical become so political that somebody decides to resign, in such a statement type of way, it's just unfortunate. It's unfortunate for the people that are supposed to benefit from the oversight of the SEC.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know what the rest of his legacy is. This seems like it's kind of overshadowing everything else. I don't know if I don't know if Samit has watched Gensler a little more closely over the past few years. I mean, he's been there a while. I guess he has people think he's quite the intellect, right? I mean, a brilliant guy and also a crypto expert, ironically, and not completely against crypto, but not really someone who seems like they feel like they've had all the gaps
Yeah.
plugged regarding fraud.
I
I
mean,
think
yeah, I mean, when you're looking at the broader ETF industry, Ron, we've seen a lot of innovation in the ETF space, take place under Gensler, right? We saw the launch of single stock ETFs. We saw all these derivative ETFs that are taking off now. So, I mean, in that sense, he hasn't, stifled the industry. I think it's really the crypto has been the one area where, been a lot of contention. But like Jeff points out, we did see the launch of spot Bitcoin ETFs and Ether ETFs as well. Maybe he did that reluctantly for political reasons. I don't know.
yeah,
I'm curious though, if any of you, James maybe has a take on whether, now that we have new leadership coming in, is it a done deal that we're going to see all sorts of crypto ETFs now, like Solana ETFs and all these other, crypto assets in an ETF wrapper?
yeah, I don't think there's ever a done deal there. But the environment is so significantly friendlier that I think the expectation, again, widely is that whoever comes in is going to be a lot more willing to approve these different types of ETFs. And it is such a far departure from where we were a little over a year ago. Gensler's hand, let's point out, and I don't know if we can really segue down this road, but was forced by this federal court decision that came out a lot more favorably for the crypto industry.
Great point. How did we not mention that? That was such
Yeah.
a big thing.
So once that ruling occurred, the spot Bitcoin ETF turned from something that may or may not have happened to something that seemed, or certainly not in the immediate future. I think the decision, when did it occur? I want to say September, October. I may be off by month in my timing there, but from that point on, the date of that decision, the likelihood increased significantly. It was only a matter of time before the spot Bitcoin ETFs received approval, and then, as I said, in short order, the Ethereum followed. That was all sort of stemmed from that court case.
All right, I think we're gonna wrap it up soon, but before we go, can I get a prediction from all of you about whether we're going to see a Dogecoin ETF in 2025? Why don't we start with you, James, Ron, and then Jeff?
I mean, I just don't see it happening. But stranger things have happened.
Pass.
Okay, I will say yes, 100% Dogecoin 2025. And Samit, what's your prediction before I wrap this up?
I agree with you, Jeff. I think we'll see it.
Yeah,
So Elon,
there is no sea too deep, no sky too high when it comes to crypto. And I don't want to sound bullish. I'm just reading the tea leaves. All right, I want to thank you all for listening. This is Exchange Traded Fridays, powered by ETF.com. It's Friday, so you should be enjoying I guess, your Thanksgiving leftovers right now. You're probably basking in the glow of another Detroit Lions victory. I want to thank my colleagues, Samit Roy, Ron Day, and James Rubin. I'm Jeff Benjamin. Thank you very much.